named Lumen, answered in a calm voice and kept the ship in perfect balance. Everything felt normal. Everything felt safe. Then a weak tone broke the calm. Lumen dimmed the cabin lights and placed a small icon on the main screen. "Commander, a distress beacon has been detected," Lumen said. The tone was faint and far away, like a whisper trying not to fade. Elias put down his cup and leaned forward. He tapped the screen, widened the view, and saw the origin point blinking on the edge of his patrol grid. "Any response signal?" he asked. "None," Lumen replied. "The beacon is on automated loop. The craft appears to be a single-occupant escape pod with low power." Elias took a quiet breath. Protocol asked him to alert the nearest station first, then wait. But waiting could cost a life. He set a new course without drama. The engines shifted to a higher focused hum. The starfield tilted, and the ship moved, sharp and sure. "Lumen, notify the station and log deviation," Elias said. "Also, warm the med bay." The AI acknowledged. As the minutes passed, the beacon tone grew clearer. Elias adjusted the long-range cameras and finally saw the pod. It was small, scratched, and spinning slowly. It reminded him of a tiny seed lost in a storm. "Gravity tether ready," Lumen said. Elias kept his voice steady. "On my mark. 3, 2, 1, now." The tether reached out with a careful pull. The spin slowed. The pod drifted toward the docking ring like a tired bird finding a safe branch. Docking clamps clicked. Faint ice vapor swirled in the bay. Elias pulled on a clean med jacket and stepped into the airlock. He kept his movements gentle and clear. He raised a hand to Lumen's camera. "Record," he said softly. The pod door released with a sigh. The air inside was cold and thin. In the pod, he saw a figure in a simple travel suit. The person was humanoid, but not human. The skin had a soft glow, like moonlight brushed on water. Delicate lines of bioluminescent markings lay across the cheeks and temples. Faint at first, and then a little brighter, as if they were breathing too. Elias knelt. "I am here to help," he said in calm, slow words. "I will move you to a safe place." The traveler's eyes fluttered. Silver flecks shimmered around deep, gentle irises. The air was too thin for long speech, so Elias worked quickly and carefully. He lifted the light body with steady hands. The traveler was not heavy, and the suit was cool and smooth. There was a small bruise on one arm and a shallow scrape near the collar, nothing severe. He did not see any deep injury. He placed a rebreather mask over the traveler's mouth and nose. The mask beeped, showed a healthy flow, and the traveler's shoulders relaxed a little. In the med bay, soft lights came on. The room was clean and simple. There was a bed, a scanner arch, and a small cabinet with universal supplies. Elias set the traveler down and let the med arch sweep a gentle blue field from head to toe. Lumen read the data in a steady tone. "Vitals present, oxygen levels rising, signs of fatigue and dehydration, minor bruising, no fractures detected." Elias smiled with relief. "Good. Start hydration. Low flow." A thin tube delivered a safe fluid mix. The traveler's fingers moved a little as if testing the air. Elias stayed close but gave space. He knew that waking in a strange place could be frightening. The traveler opened their eyes slowly and looked at him with focus. The silver flecks caught the med light like tiny stars. "You are safe," Elias said. "My name is Elias Kane. This is a patrol vessel. You are on board." The traveler spoke a soft word in another language. It was musical and light. Lumen translated after a quick scan through known language families. "She says thank you." The traveler took a slow breath. "Lyra," she said in careful, gentle English now, touching her chest. "My name is Lyra." Elias bowed his head a little. "Hello, Lyra. Welcome." He showed both hands, open and empty, a sign of peace. She watched him, then nodded. Elias offered warm broth in a small cup. Lyra sat up with care and held the cup in both hands. She took tiny sips, and her markings brightened a little, like soft lanterns under the skin. "We will take things slowly," Elias said, keeping his voice at a friendly level. "Do you remember what happened to your pod?" Lyra looked down. "A field of small stones," she said, searching for the right words. "They were like sand in space. The pod shook. Then dark." Elias glanced at Lumen's sensor logs. That matched the data, a minor micrometeor field, nothing anyone could plan for. "You did well to launch the beacon," he said. Lyra gave a small smile, shy and grateful. Over the next hours, the ship sailed a calm path once more. Elias set a gentle course toward the nearest Allied station, filed updates, and kept a quiet watch. Lyra rested. Now and then she opened her eyes and looked at the ceiling as if listening to it. "Your ship hums in a kindly way," she said once. "It sounds like a low choir singing." Elias smiled. "I never thought of it like that," he said. He did hear it, too, the way the ship seemed to breathe and sing. He felt proud of that. He had tuned the harmonics over the years, shaving off harsh edges until only a soft tone remained. It made long days feel friendly. When Lyra felt stronger, he showed her the viewing dome. It was a small bubble near the ship's middle, with seats and a star projector. Lyra sat with her hands around a warm cup and looked out into the radiant dark. The Andromeda star lanes made smooth paths across the black, as if written with quiet light. "Where is your home?" Elias asked. Lyra pointed to a spot the projector could not name. "Far," she said with a small, fond laugh. She told him a few things, simple and dear. Her people liked songs that used hand chimes. They painted stories on the walls of meeting halls, not with bright colors, but with soft shades that only fully showed when a low lamp was lit. She had made such a painting once, about a river that learned to flow uphill. Elias shared simple things, too. He showed a map of Earth and pointed to oceans and mountains and the long lines of rivers that cut the land like silver threads. He played a short piece of piano music from an old file. The notes were slow and peaceful. Lyra listened with eyes half closed. "It is like rain on warm stone," she said. "It smells like that, too, in my mind." They did not speak about heavy things. They did not try to explain the whole past or the whole future. They just made a small, quiet world between two seats and a dome of glass, where stars moved in silence and tea kept its glow. At routine intervals, Elias checked the med scans. Almost everything was normal for someone tired and dehydrated, but one pattern sat outside the usual charts. Lumen highlighted it with a soft blue ring. "Commander, note this," the AI said. "Her cell activity shows a secondary rhythm that does not match standard Chirani profiles in our archive. It is gentle and not a danger sign. It looks like a harmonic wave." Elias studied the graph. It did look like a small wave singing under the main line. "Is it from our ship?" he asked. Lumen ran a test and answered, "It may be influenced by our engine resonance. The frequency is close." Elias adjusted the engine hum down by a fraction. The ship did not mind. The chairs did not feel any different. But Lyra's markings, those tiny lines at her temples, glowed a little brighter and then settled. She did not seem troubled. In fact, she looked more relaxed. "The hum is kinder," she said, almost as if talking to herself. "It sits in the bones in a sweet way now." Elias wrote a note in the ship log and set a flag to watch the pattern. He did not think it was dangerous, but it was unusual. He liked to pay attention when things were unusual. More than once, attention had saved a life. Later, he found a small charm tucked into the lining of Lyra's torn suit. It was a simple piece, a thin ring with a clear bead inside. The bead held a faint swirl, like a tiny cloud. The ring had cracked during the rough ride in the pod. Elias brought out a repair kit and took his time. He used soft light, gentle heat, and a steady hand. When he finished, the crack was gone, and the bead shone clear and clean. He placed the charm on a linen cloth and brought it to Lyra. She looked at it, then at him. Her eyes were bright. "You fixed it," she said. Her voice carried small surprise and deep relief. "It is from my mother." Elias felt the room go even more quiet. "I am glad," he said. "Some things deserve to stay whole." As the first day turned into the second, Lyra began to walk the short hall between Medbay and Viewing Dome. She moved with grace, though still a bit slow. She touched the wall now and then, as if to greet the ship. When she grew tired, she rested without complaint. Elias kept his distance in a respectful way. He did not crowd her. He did not ask for more stories than she wanted to tell. He showed her where the water spout was and how the door seals worked. He said, "If you need anything, ask Lumen or me." And he meant it. Lumen responded kindly when she asked small questions like, "What does this light mean?" Or, "May I make the room a little warmer?" The scans kept showing the same odd rhythm. It pulsed like a soft echo under the usual lines. Lumen plotted it across time and showed curves that rose and fell. They did not rise too high. They did not fall too low. And even Lumen's voice carried a softer tone when speaking to her. The days after her rescue moved steadily, each one marked by small routines. Elias made sure she was eating proper meals, sometimes adjusting the flavor settings to match the soft spice she said reminded her of home. Lyra began walking more, her strength returning slowly but clearly. She liked to pause near the observation ports, resting her hand lightly on the frame as if greeting the stars. Elias would sometimes catch her humming, a soft, wordless melody. Lumen's sensors noted the ship's background hum subtly shifting during those moments, as though the vessel was somehow harmonizing with her song. On the third evening since the rescue, the warning about an approaching ion storm appeared on the nav screen. It wasn't catastrophic, but the storm's path would cross theirs in less than 2 hours. Elias leaned forward, checking the coordinates, frowning. "We can skirt the edge if we push the engines, but that'll strain them," he said aloud. Lumen's voice came calmly. "Commander, the safest choice is to shelter in the reinforced core chamber until the storm passes. Estimated duration, 7 hours, 30 minutes. Elias exhaled. 7 hours stuck in the core. It wasn't dangerous, but it would mean confined space. The core chamber was a narrow, well-protected room near the ship's central spine, safe from electromagnetic surges but not exactly comfortable. He turned to Lyra, who was seated in the corner of the bridge, quietly reading a small projection of her people's stories. "Lyra," he said gently, "we have a storm coming. We'll need to stay in a safe room for a while." She looked up. "Storm? Bad?" she asked, testing the word. "Not bad," Elias assured her. "Just loud, and it can damage equipment if we're not careful." "We'll be fine," Lyra nodded, trusting his calm tone. She stood slowly, smoothing the fabric of her borrowed ship suit. "I follow you." The first shivers of the ion storm touched the hull as they entered the core chamber. The lights flickered once, then steadied. The chamber was compact, just enough space for 2 padded benches along the wall. a small emergency supply locker, and a low table fixed to the floor. The walls were thick, with embedded shielding that glowed faintly when the storm's energy washed over the ship. When the first strong wave hit, the hum of the engines deepened and the walls vibrated like a drum touched by wind. Lyra's eyes widened. "It sings," she said softly. Aaliyah smiled faintly. "That's one way to think about it." They sat opposite each other on the benches at first, the table between them. Elias kept the emergency monitor on, scanning the storm's readings. Lyra watched the blue light patterns on the wall, her head tilting slightly as if following invisible threads in the air. The storm's rhythm was unpredictable, sometimes a steady pulse, sometimes a sudden surge. After an hour, the benches felt hard and the air seemed smaller. Elias shifted, stretching his legs. Lyra mirrored the movement, glancing at him. "You stay in this box many times?" she asked. "Not often," he replied. "Only when it's safer here than out there." Lyra looked around slowly. "Your safe room feels quiet inside even when outside is loud?" He nodded. "That's the idea." He wanted to keep the conversation light, so he asked about her home. Lyra's words came in simple phrases at first, but then her voice gained a rhythm, like water finding its flow. She told him of her world's oceans, wide and silver under twin moons, dotted with islands where her people built homes from coral and stone. She described gatherings under soft lamps, where stories were sung instead of spoken. She told him of her father, who carved the frame of her family's doorway with tiny stars, and her mother, who painted those stars with a pigment that only glowed when warmed by a living hand. Elias listened with genuine interest, occasionally asking a question. In return, he shared pieces of Earth, cities lit like constellations, mountain ranges that cut the horizon, deserts where the air shimmered in the heat. He spoke of music that traveled centuries and still touched people. He found himself telling her about his first ship, an old freighter he'd repaired with his uncle, and how proud he'd been when it finally lifted off the ground. Time began to blur. The storm outside intensified, the shielding walls humming in deeper tones. The air felt charged, not unpleasant but strange, as if the space around them held a quiet energy. Lyra leaned slightly forward, resting her hands on the table. The faint markings on her skin glowed more than before, tracing delicate lines from her temples down her neck. Elias noticed, but said nothing. At one point, the lights dimmed for several seconds, and the engine's hum shifted into a low, resonant note. Lumen's voice came through the wall speaker, calm but quieter than usual. "Electromagnetic activity is peaking. Remain inside until I confirm stability." Lyra closed her eyes as if listening to something beyond the storm. "Your ship. It hums with my breath," she murmured. Elias tilted his head. "What do you mean?" She opened her eyes slowly. "When I breathe slow, the hum feels slower." "When I breathe fast, it feels faster." He wasn't sure if it was her perception or something more, but he decided not to dismiss it. "Maybe you're just in tune with it right now," he said lightly. Hours passed like this, sharing fragments of stories, sitting in companionable quiet, sometimes just listening to the layered sounds of storm and ship. The space between them no longer felt awkward. In the steady, enclosed safety of the core chamber, there was a rare kind of closeness, the kind that didn't need grand gestures, just the trust of knowing the other person was there. Sometime, near what would have been dawn ship time, the storm began to fade. The vibration in the walls softened, and the glow of the shielding dimmed to a faint halo. Elias stood and stretched. "Looks like it's letting up. Another hour and we can leave." Lyra smiled faintly, though her expression carried something deeper. Thoughtfulness, maybe even hesitation. She touched her fingers to the table, tracing an invisible pattern. "You keep me safe," she said quietly. "It's my job," Elias replied, though the words felt smaller than the truth. She looked at him then, her silver-flecked eyes steady. "And maybe more than your job." The comment hung in the air, not in a heavy way, but as a simple truth she wanted to acknowledge. Elias met her gaze for a moment, then nodded. "Maybe more," he admitted. They stayed in the chamber until Lumen confirmed the storm had passed. The door seals released with a soft hiss, and they stepped back into the open corridors. The air in the rest of the ship felt lighter, the hum returning to its normal, steady tone. The next day, Elias noticed a change in Lyra. She moved with more purpose, her eyes scanning the displays with curiosity. She asked small, practical questions about the ship's systems and the journey ahead. He answered each one, showing her the safe parts of the controls and letting her watch as he ran basic checks. She seemed to absorb the information quickly, nodding with a small smile each time she understood something new. But there was something else too, subtle but present. Lumen's med scans continued to show that odd secondary rhythm in her biology. It had grown slightly stronger since the storm. Elias asked Lumen to run a deeper analysis, but the AI only replied, "The pattern is stable and not harmful. It remains outside known Chirani biological profiles." When he brought her a meal in the viewing dome, she seemed distracted. She looked at him with a searching expression. "Elias," she began, "I feel different." "In what way?" he asked, setting the tray down. She hesitated, pressing her hand lightly to her midsection, not in pain but as if sensing something. "Like something is starting." Her voice was quiet, unsure. Elias felt a flicker of concern. "Do you feel sick?" She shook her head. "Not sick, just new." He didn't press her, not yet. Instead, he suggested they do another med scan in the morning. She agreed, but her eyes still held that thoughtful, almost unsettled light. That night. Elias found himself lying awake in his quarters, listening to the faint ship hum through the walls. He thought about the storm, about her words, about that strange connection she claimed to feel with the ship's rhythm. Part of him wanted to believe it was just the residue of the storm's energy interacting with her biology. But another part wondered if something truly rare had happened in that small, shielded chamber. When he finally slept, his dreams were of starlit oceans and glowing markings drifting like constellations over warm water. The following day began as usual, with morning checks and system updates. Lyra came to the med bay without needing to be called. She sat on the scanner bed, calm but expectant. Lumen's scanning arch passed its gentle light over her once, twice, 3 times. Elias watched the data scroll across the display. The odd secondary rhythm was there as always, but now it pulsed with a slightly faster beat, like a tide gaining momentum. "Any idea what's causing it?" Elias asked Lumen. "No definitive match in current biological databases," Lumen replied. "However, the pattern's characteristics suggest a sustained bioelectric resonance." "Resonance with what?" "Unknown." She waited until the scanner finished its sweep. Lumen's voice had just said, "Scan complete, no harmful anomalies detected," when Lyra took a slow breath and spoke in careful, measured English. "Elias, am I pregnant, human?" The words seemed to hang in the air like frozen starlight. Elias blinked, certain he had misheard. What? He said softly. Lyra did not repeat herself exactly. Instead, she clarified, her silver-flecked eyes steady. I feel something inside me, something new. My body feels different. My people say we can know such things early, even before signs. She placed a hand lightly over her midsection. Not dramatic, just an instinctive gesture. Elias ran a hand over his jaw, searching for the right response. Lyra, human biology and Kairani biology aren't supposed to be compatible. She nodded slowly. I know. I learned this from our science, too. But I also know our kind can begin life in rare ways, through resonance. That word made Elias pause. Resonance. Like the bioelectric pattern Lumen's been detecting in your scans? Yes, Lyra replied, her voice low but sure. Sometimes, in our history, when a Kairani shares close space with another being, during a strong energy event, something can begin. It is rare. Some of our stories call it storm bonding. Elias felt the memory of the ion storm return, the deep hum in the core chamber, the strange synchrony between her breathing and the ship's rhythm. He exhaled slowly. Lyra, are you saying the storm might have... He stopped himself. Her expression was calm, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. I am saying I must know. I must be sure. Elias straightened. All right. Let's find out. Lumen, run a full spectrum scan. Compare human and Kairani reproductive markers. Check for any sign of hybrid formation. The medbay lights dimmed slightly as Lumen began the deep scan. A thin field of blue light passed over Lyra again and again, each sweep slower than the last. Elias stayed beside her, watching the data streams on the display. His pulse was steady, but his mind was anything but calm. The first results appeared. Lumen's voice was precise, almost cautious. Commander, subject Lyra exhibits baseline Kairani physiology with standard cellular patterns. However, there is an additional cell cluster forming in the abdominal region. The genetic profile of the cluster contains markers from both Kairani and human DNA. Elias stared at the display, his voice quiet. You mean... Yes, Lumen said. The subject is in the early stage of carrying a hybrid life form. Lyra's hands folded gently in her lap. She did not gasp or cry out, only closed her eyes for a moment as if listening inward. When she opened them again, her gaze met Elias's. So, it is true. For a long moment, neither spoke. The hum of the ship seemed louder, filling the silence. Elias finally said, Lyra, I don't know what to say. This has never happened before. Not between our species. I know, she said quietly. But it has happened now. She glanced at the screen where the faint outline of the cell cluster pulsed softly. It began in the storm. That is why I felt different. Elias rubbed the back of his neck, pacing a few steps. The science teams at the stations will want to study this. They'll want to run tests, take samples, monitor everything. And... He stopped, frowning. Lyra, there will be attention, curiosity, maybe not all of it welcome. She looked down briefly. In my world, a child is a blessing. But a child not fully of our kind, some would fear it, some would reject it. Elias felt a tightness in his chest. And on Earth, we've had our own history of fear when something new appears. I can't promise they'd react better. Lyra lifted her head, her voice steady. Then you must answer this. Will you stand with me? There was no hesitation. Yes, Elias said. No matter what this means, no matter what comes next, I'll stand with you. They agreed the next step was to seek expert help. The nearest place with advanced xenobiological facilities was the research station on Ardent 6, 3 days away at their current speed. Elias adjusted the course immediately. During the journey, their conversations changed. There was still light. Talk about constellations, music, and foods they missed. But now there was also planning. Elias explained what to expect at Ardent 6. Security checks, intake interviews, the structured way scientists documented anomalies. Lyra listened carefully, sometimes asking if she could refuse certain procedures. Elias promised she would have a choice in everything. At night, Elias reviewed Kairani cultural archives to understand their customs around new life. He learned that Kairani mothers traditionally kept a circle of guardians during the early stages, a small group who vowed to protect both mother and child. He didn't say it aloud, but in his mind, he'd already joined that circle. 2. Days into the trip, they encountered trouble. A pair of small pirate crafts appeared on the edge of their sensor range, approaching fast. Elias reacted quickly, bringing the ship into a defensive posture. "Lyra, strap in," he said, guiding her to the co-pilot's seat. The pirates hailed them once. No words, just a digital demand to cut engines. Elias ignored it, boosting their speed and using the asteroid fragments in the area for cover. The ship's maneuvering thrusters worked hard, sliding them between jagged rocks and narrow gaps. Lyra gripped the armrest but stayed calm, her eyes alert. At one point, a pirate ship swung too close, trying to force them out of the cover zone. Elias dipped under it, fired a short burst from the ship's flash disruptor, and sent the smaller vessel spinning off course. The second pirate broke away, unwilling to continue alone. When they were clear, Elias glanced at her. "You all right?" Lyra exhaled slowly. "You fly like river water, fast, but you always find the way." He smiled faintly. "I'll take that as a compliment." That night, Lyra spoke more about her fears. "Elias, I do not worry only for myself. If the child is real, if it lives, I worry what kind of place it will find in this wide sky. My people may not claim it. Your people may not trust it." Elias considered her words carefully. "Then maybe it's our job to make a place for it, even if we have to build it ourselves." Lyra studied him for a long moment, as though weighing the truth of his promise. Then she nodded once. On the final day before reaching Ardent 6, Elias prepared the necessary transmissions for arrival. He kept the details vague. Medical consultation needed for unusual biological readings to avoid drawing early attention. But despite the approaching answers, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of something much larger. Lyra, meanwhile, seemed calmer than before. She spent time in the viewing dome, sometimes speaking softly in her own language, as if telling the stars a secret. When Elias asked what she was saying, she replied, "I am asking them to watch over us." When Ardent 6 finally came into view, a glittering wheel turning slowly against the backdrop of a blue nebula, Lyra stood beside him on the bridge. The station's lights blinked a steady welcome, but Elias knew that inside those walls would be questions, tests, and perhaps more challenges than either of them could yet imagine. He glanced at her, her markings faint but steady, her expression unreadable but strong. "Ready?" he asked. "As I will ever be," she said. "Complete," Lumen announced. Station control requests you proceed to medical intake. Elias glanced at Lyra. She stood straight, her hands relaxed at her sides, but her silver-flecked eyes studied the closed airlock door as if reading its intentions. "We'll go together," he said quietly. She nodded once, her expression calm, but alert. The airlock hissed open and they stepped into a bright reception corridor lined with smooth walls and soft floor lights. A pair of station staff members waited. One human, one from a feline-like species with tall ears and golden eyes. Both wore pale gray medical uniforms with the Ardent 6 emblem stitched at the shoulder. "Commander Kane," the human greeted, politely, then turned to Lyra. "And you must be Lyra. Welcome to Ardent 6. Please follow us to the xenobiology wing." Lyra inclined her head in a respectful gesture, and they began walking. The corridors curved gently, following the station's rotation. They passed viewing windows where distant stars spun in slow arcs. Lyra's gaze lingered on them, perhaps as a small anchor in this unfamiliar place. The medical suite was spacious, with walls that shifted their light temperature to match the comfort of the patient's species. Lyra's side of the room glowed, with a soft, silver warmth that made her markings faintly shimmer. A tall scientist with warm brown eyes introduced herself as Dr. Celine Avaris, lead xenobiologist. Elias gave her a brief summary. The rescue, the ion storm, the unusual biological, scans, and Lyra's suspicion of pregnancy. Dr. Avaris listened without interruption, her hands folded lightly before her. When Elias finished, she said, "This will require a multi-phase scan. Lyra, you will have full control over what procedures are done. If you wish to stop at any time, you can." Lyra's voice was steady. "I understand. I wish to know the truth." The first phase began with non-invasive imaging. A gentle field of pale light swept over Lyra, forming a three-dimensional projection in the air. Elias stood at her side, watching the image take shape. Within moments, a small cluster appeared, bright at the center, surrounded by a faint halo. Dr. Avaris pointed. "That is what we call the formation node. In your case, Lyra, this node contains mixed DNA strands, Chirani and human. It is remarkable." She adjusted the projection's scale. "The human contribution matches Commander Kane's genetic markers." Elias felt the weight of her words. It wasn't just theory anymore. It was fact. Lyra's gaze was fixed on the projection. Her voice was quiet but clear. "It is alive?" "Yes," Dr. Avaris said gently. "In the earliest stage, but stable." Phase 2 was deeper analysis. Cell behavior, metabolic exchange, and developmental projections. The results were unlike anything in the station's database. The hybrid cells showed a rare adaptability, weaving traits from both species in a seamless way. "This is not just viable," Dr. Avaris said, studying the readout. "It is thriving." She looked between them. "You should both understand. This is the first recorded case of its kind. Its survival potential is far higher than anyone would expect for such a genetic mix. It may even have advantages we cannot yet measure." Elias glanced at Lyra. She was still watching the image, but now her expression had softened. Not into a smile exactly, but into something steady, like the settling of a decision. When the scans ended, Lyra was offered a seat in a quieter consultation room. Dr. Avaris placed a small data tablet on the table between them. "You have two options," she explained. "Option 1, remain here at Ardent 6 under observation. We can monitor the hybrids, development closely, ensure any health concerns are addressed immediately, and gather important scientific data. Option 2, leave with Commander Kane and continue your journey. We will give you a portable monitoring kit, but you would be responsible for regular updates." Lyra listened without interrupting. "If I stay," she asked, "how many people will know of this?" "At least a dozen. My team, station command, and potentially higher authorities, depending on the results." And if I leave? Dr. Avaris hesitated. Far fewer will know, but you will have less immediate support if complications arise. Elias leaned forward slightly. Lyra, it's your choice. Whatever you decide, I'll be with you. She looked at him for a long moment, then back to Dr. Avaris. When I was in the storm, she said slowly, I felt something begin inside me. It was not fear, it was a thread, a connection. I believe it began because I was not alone. Her silver-flecked eyes turned to Elias again. I want that to continue. I choose to leave with him. Dr. Avaris studied her, then nodded. Very well. I will prepare the monitoring kit and full instructions. As they walked back toward the docking bay, Elias noticed Lyra's steps were lighter than before, as if the certainty of her choice had lifted some invisible weight. The portable kit was secured in a small case, slim, discreet, easy to carry. You could have stayed, Elias said softly. It might have been easier. Easier is not always better, Lyra replied. I want to be with the one who kept me safe when the storm came. Before departure, Dr. Avaris met them at the airlock. One last thing, she said. The hybrid cell activity is unusually sensitive to bioelectric fields. Strong resonance, like what may have occurred during the storm, could accelerate development. That is not necessarily dangerous, but it is unusual. Be mindful of environments with heavy energy fluctuations. Elias nodded. We'll be careful. Lyra accepted the small packet of instructions with a polite bow of her head. Thank you for helping us. Dr. Avaris's voice was warm. You're carrying something extraordinary, Lyra. Protect it well. Once back on the ship, the familiar hum of the engines felt like home. Lyra placed the monitoring kit in the med bay, then joined Elias on the bridge. Outside the viewing glass, Ardent 6 drifted into the distance, its silver wheels slowly shrinking against the star field. Elias adjusted their course. Any particular direction you want to go? Lyra's gaze stayed on the stars. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere the sky is wide and the storms are far away, unless they are the kind that bring new beginnings. He smiled faintly. I think I know just the place. The journey away from the station felt different from the one toward it. There was no uncertainty about the truth now, only the reality of what they carried between them. The portable monitor chimed softly once an hour, confirming the steady rhythm of the hybrid's growth. Lyra would glance at the display, her markings glowing just a little brighter afterward. They settled into a new rhythm, shared meals, navigation duties, quiet evenings in the viewing dome. Sometimes Elias would catch Lyra studying him as if trying to memorize his features. When he asked why, she simply said, I want our child to know you, even in the small lines of your face. One evening, as they passed through a sparse star field, Lyra spoke of her hopes. I want it to know two homes, she said, the water songs of my people and the strong winds of yours. I want it to walk on land and swim in deep oceans. I want it to see stars not as far lights, but as places it can reach. Elias listened quietly, feeling the truth of her words settle in him. Then we'll make sure it can, he said. Lyra looked at him for a long moment, then smiled. The first true, unguarded smile he'd seen from her since the rescue. In the quiet hum of the ship, far from the research bays of Ardent 6, they carried forward not just a rare life, but a shared promise. Neither knew exactly what lay ahead, what challenges, what dangers, or what wonders, but both knew this. surface with gold and the thin clouds glowed softly. "It looks like a place that listens," she said quietly. Elias smiled. "Listens?" "Yes," she replied. "Some places only speak. This one listens. That is good for new life." Her hand rested lightly over her midsection, a gesture she made often now without realizing it. They landed on a grassy plateau that sloped gently toward a silver river. The air was clean, carrying the scent of wet stone and distant flowers. Lyra stepped down from the ship slowly, her silver-flecked eyes scanning the horizon. She breathed deeply, her markings glowing faintly in the sunlight. "It feels alive." "Here," she murmured. Elias secured the ship, set up a portable shelter, and activated the monitoring kit. The small device gave its usual soft chime. The hybrid's growth was steady, its heartbeat strong. Lyra listened to the sound, her expression peaceful. For several days, they lived in a simple rhythm. Elias explored the nearby hills for fresh water sources and edible plants. Lyra spent time by the river, sometimes humming the same wordless melodies she had sung in the viewing dome. At night, they would sit outside and watch the slow arc of constellations overhead. It was peaceful, until the morning they heard another engine. Elias was checking the ship's fuel lines when Lumen's voice came sharply over the intercom. "Commander, an unidentified vessel is entering local airspace. Approach speed, moderate, no response to hails." He looked toward the sky and saw the distant glint of metal against the clouds. Lyra stepped out of the shelter, her posture tense. "They come. For us?" "I don't know yet," Elias replied, already moving toward the ship. He brought up the long-range sensors. The incoming craft was small, likely a scout ship, but its signature didn't match local traders. Worse, its course was a direct path to their landing site. Within minutes, the vessel slowed and circled above them before settling on the far side of the plateau. The hatch opened, and 3 figures emerged. All wore dark exploration suits with no visible insignia. 2 carried equipment cases, and 1 had a handheld scanner that pulsed with blue light. Elias walked forward to meet them, keeping his stance neutral but ready. "Identify yourselves," he called out. The lead figure raised a hand in greeting, but didn't give a name. "We detected unusual bioelectric readings in this region. We're here to investigate." "Strange place for random investigation," Elias said evenly. The scanner wielder's gaze shifted toward Lyra, who stood behind Elias, her hand instinctively at her side. "Readings match those from Ardent 6's secure files," the figure said. "You have something unique here." Elias's voice hardened. "Whatever you think we have, it's not yours." The lead figure's tone remained polite, but firm. "We're not here to take it. We just need samples. For science." Lyra stepped forward, her voice calm but carrying steel. "It is not a sample. It is a life." The silence that followed was heavy. The 3 strangers exchanged a glance. The leader spoke again, softer this time. "If that's true, then it's more important than you realize. But if you won't cooperate, others will come, less patient than we are." Elias made his decision in a breath. "You've delivered your warning. Now leave." The strangers hesitated, but something in his tone made them turn back toward their ship. Moments later, their engines roared, and they lifted into the sky, vanishing into the cloud cover. Lyra stood very still, her markings dimming. "They will come again," she said quietly. "I know," Elias admitted. "That's why we'll be ready." That evening, Elias reinforced the ship's perimeter systems, adding extra sensor alarms and adjusting the camouflage field to blend with the plateau's grass tones. Lyra stayed nearby, watching him work. "You have protected me since the storm," she said. "But this is different. This is not the universe's danger, it is people's." He paused, meeting her gaze. Then we'll protect ourselves from people too. Her eyes softened, but her voice stayed steady. Not just us. We protect all of us. Her hand returned to her midsection, a silent reminder of who all truly meant now. Days passed without more visitors. They resumed their peaceful routine, though Elias remained watchful. The portable monitor continued to give steady readings, each chime a quiet reassurance. Lyra's strength held, and she began to walk longer distances along the river. Sometimes she would stop and place a hand in the water, murmuring something in her own language. One afternoon, as Elias returned from a short survey of the nearby hills, he found Lyra sitting cross-legged by the riverbank, eyes closed. The light played across her markings, and for a moment she looked almost like a part of the river itself. "You're quiet today," he said, sitting beside her. "I was listening," she replied. "This place hums differently than your ship, but the hum is still kind. I think our child hears it too." Elias smiled faintly. "Then it's already learning the sound of the universe." That night, a soft rain began to fall. They sat beneath the shelter's awning, watching the droplets ripple across the river's surface. Lyra spoke suddenly, her voice thoughtful. "Elias, do you think it will look more like you or me?" He chuckled softly. "Maybe both. Maybe neither. Maybe something new entirely." She considered that, then nodded. "Something new is good. The universe needs new things to grow." A week later, the monitor gave its first different reading, a slight increase in the hybrid's energy pattern. Elias checked the data twice, then showed it to Lyra. "It's growing faster," he said. "Dr. Avaris warned us this could happen if there's strong resonance." Lyra looked out toward the horizon, where the plateau met the sky. "Maybe it is the river. Maybe it sings to it." Whatever the cause, the change was steady and healthy. The readings continued to improve over the next days. Lyra seemed to glow more in the sunlight, her movements more sure. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the plains turned gold, Elias stood beside Lyra at the river's edge. The sky above them stretched wide, painted in soft orange and deep blue. "You know," Elias said quietly, "when I first heard your beacon, I didn't think about anything except getting you to safety. I never imagined it would lead to this." Lyra turned to him, her eyes bright. "And yet, here we are, a human and a Kairani standing at the edge of a world, carrying something the universe has never seen before." He nodded slowly. "One night changed everything." "Yes," she said, "but it was not only the night. It was the choice you made when you opened the pod, and the choice I made to trust you." They stood in silence for a while, listening to the river. The soft rain from earlier in the week had returned, but neither moved to go inside. The sound of the drops on the water was too peaceful to leave. By the time the stars appeared, Elias knew something with complete certainty. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whether from strangers who saw the hybrid as an experiment, or from the unknown future of raising a life that belonged to two worlds, they would face them together. For now there was only the hum of the ship in the distance, the quiet heartbeat from the monitor, and the bond between them that had begun in a storm and grown into something far greater. Above them, the constellations wheeled slowly, as if the universe itself had paused to watch. And somewhere within Lyra, a life stirred. Small, new, and extraordinary, a promise carried forward into the endless sky.